cross-city tunnel, the Perth Southern Railway, for the Omega project. Omega is a 10-nation study of transport mega projects led by Professor Harry Demetriou of University College London. The research was recently featured in a major article in The Age. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Sophie Starup.
So yeah, I'm just really pleased to be here. My research, what I want to talk about today is my research on mega projects. And what I was trying to do in that research was to try to understand the madness of mega projects. You know, why do we have money? Why do we have these projects that we can't abandon when any rational person would look at them and go, this is madness, and yet we continue with them and spend more and more and more money on them. So I was actually trying to research that, trying to find a legitimate, academically formulated way of understanding what is going on and why do we become so attached to these things. So in doing that, I looked at 3 different... Is it going to get better if I go closer or closer? Okay. So... Closer? I am closer, yes. But you have to turn the sound down, so I don't shout at people. So the issue that I was trying to address was this question of why is it that mega projects consistently run over time, they run over budget, they fail to produce the kinds of benefits which they're supposed to produce, and yet we continue to do them and we continue to be attached to doing them. So what I found... So what I found was that mentalities in mega projects have 3 elements, if you like, three sort of features that you can see going on. Yes, the next slide. The first one is that the logic of power in these projects is sovereignty. It's not democracy. Okay? So these projects are not democratic. They are internal to themselves. They have a logic of power which is somebody with the power to say so said, we're going to do this project. And everything that happens after that is a function of that decision. So everyone's power to do anything in the course of this is now subject to that decision, and therefore is subject to that decision being correct. And people invest an enormous amount of their own personal integrity into these things. So they can't ask the question, should we be doing this? That question was dealt with when the sovereign decision was taken. Now, I'm not saying the sovereign like the king, but when the government says, we're going to do this thing, assuming we can sort out all the details like budgets and money and routes and so on, once that's been made, it's incredibly difficult to question, should we be doing this? That question's been dealt with, right? Important people have said it's true. We must do this. And everybody who's doing anything related to the project has to operate as though that decision cannot be questioned. The second element that, that we found was that the process of mega projects is dominated by project thinking. And project thinking requires that you encapsulate the object you're trying to create and you keep it as far away from anybody who might wish to disrupt it as possible. Right? Successful project managers will tell you that how you create a successful project is you hide it off away from any kind of political process as fast as possible. You define it inside extremely tightly bound measures, because that is how you will come up with something which is deliverable on time and on budget. And that is the nature of project thinking. So the design of a project manager, the thinking that they're trying to achieve is, what are we building? How do I define it precisely so that I can budget it precisely, I can create precise myself, I love projects. They're fantastic. There's a whole kind of buzz that you get when you work in projects. They're incredibly powerful at delivering very, very tricky things, as Ilana was just saying, with the Mandarin Railway delivered on time, on budget by some very, very clever project managers who really did, I think you agree, open their veins to make it happen. But, you know, that's the nature of project management. It has a few issues for you guys, though, which I'll talk about in a bit. So there's this very strong resistance to change of the project. And that comes into play really early on. Project managers don't like it when people start going, well, let's just add a railway. Let's just extend the road another, 15 kilometres. Let's build the City West link and the Doncaster Freeway Railway and, turn this into a project that was actually going to make a difference to, public transport in our city and the structure of our city. No, it's much easier. Let's keep it down at this little thing that we can actually deliver, even though to you and I, $6 billion doesn't sound like a little thing. The third thing that we found, or I found, was that problems and solutions in these things go together. So normal people usually believe that what happens is there's a problem, and the government and a bunch of clever people come around and they figure out, well, there's a problem, we should fix it, and so they deliver a solution to fix this problem. That's not really what goes on in these projects. What actually happens is a process of construction of the problem in such a way that the solution which is at hand becomes the obvious thing to do to solve that problem. Now, you can see that process going on at the moment with this tunnel, right? We started off with the Eddington thing. It wasn't about this tunnel. It wasn't about the east. It was about the west. It was about people crossing the Maribyrnong, right? We now have, it was about a project which was not going to make any difference to traffic in Alexander Parade. It was about a project which was not going to make any difference to traffic in Princess Street. It would prevent the problem that would be created by linking the freeway, the Eastern Freeway, to CityLink, which was an increase in trucks, from harming traffic numbers in Alexander Parade. But it wouldn't actually do anything about the cars because it's an established thing. It was established in the report that car usage was not going to be brought down by building more roads. A new railway would be required to do that. So, that was the old problem. The old problem was lots of people trying to cross the Maribyrnong River. Now we have a new problem. And the problem is now redefined as traffic bottled up at the end of the Eastern Freeway. The Eastern Freeway doesn't connect, which is somehow just a problem, which needs fixing. Now, if your problem is that the freeway does not connect to anything, then clearly the solution is to connect it to things. But I'm pretty sure that most of the people in this room don't feel that the problem is that the freeway doesn't connect to anything. The problem is that when you sit in your car on the Eastern Freeway, you're in a car park. And when you try to get home and it's raining, or when you try and get here and it's raining, and there's lots of people on the road and there's roadworks in Alexander Parade, you can't get here. That's the problem, right? But that's not the problem that this road is dealing with. And part of what you can see is going on is an attempt to reconstruct the problem so that this tunnel is the solution. That's my word of warning. Okay. So, in terms of the consultation process, what I found was that you have basically 3 phases. Now, there's a small box in between, in the middle there. That's because in Victoria, around the CityLink project in the 1980s, we did do a momentary, almost public consultation on what we should do. Okay? But generally, in the first phase of the concept of consultation, You have problem and solution being constructed. Now, in the main, this is done by experts. This is not done by the public. This is done by people who know better, who run around and think about things, and often they're people who know how to build certain things. And they say, well, you know, we think the problem is this, and the solution is this, and so they construct this whole thing and figure out what we should do. The primary question inside of that discussion is what we should do. In this project, that conversation is over. They're not talking to you about what we should do. That's a problem, considering you don't want them to build a road, you want them to build a train line, right? But be aware, the consultation process that is going on around the East Wells Tunnel is not asking you what we should do. It's asking you, how will you be affected by this road? And how are we going to ameliorate your concerns? And that is very obvious. You can see it in the latest newsletter, to quote, once we have these back, we will review the various ideas, looking at where we can minimise impacts to the community, reflecting our community consultation and best value for money. Right? So when you engage in community consultation on the tunnel, they're not asking you, should we do this? They're asking you, okay, how do we make you feel better about it? How do we figure out whether your houses are going to fall down? How do we figure out whether or not you'll be able to get out in and out of your driveway still? You know, we put the tunnel where we put it, and so on and so forth. Right? That's what they're consulting with you about. And it's very important that you realise how this works. Okay? So the more you protest about where the road goes, and where the tunnel goes, and what route it goes on, and where the pole will be, and will I be able to get in and out of my driveway, the more you validate the fact that the tunnel is going ahead. About that. That's right, no tunnel. So I did some preliminary thinking about, if I looked through my kind of analysis at the sorts of things that are going on around this freeway, and this is by no means a full study, because I've only been at it for a week or so, but looking at the documentation that is around this tunnel and where it comes from, I read through the Eddington reports and the cost-benefit analysis and the traffic studies and so on. And I have to say, you come to some pretty interesting conclusions when you try to look for what are the continuing stories around coming out of this dialogue, coming out of these kind of reports about this tunnel. One thing that's sort of stark and slightly worrying is that it's been given to the Linking Melbourne Authority. Now, the Linking Melbourne Authority's job has been, up until now, to build freeway linkages. That's what they know how to do. So what you have in that organisation is a bunch of experts, project managers, who love their jobs. And they really like doing what they do. And what they know how to do is build roads. And they don't know anything about how to build a railway. So you've got a big push towards doing a particular thing. And I don't think that you should be fooled into thinking that this is about thousands of construction workers having something to do. Because the construction workers could just as easily be put onto a rail project as they could on It's about project managers and the elite group that are really good at what they do, right? Don't get me wrong, they are really good at what they do. Some of them were there in the City Link, which was a good project, delivered on time, on budget, delivered what it said it would do. That they've done East Link. I don't know a lot about whether or not that was a good project, but I literally have not studied it at all. But a lot of these people are good at what they do. They will produce. If they come up with a figure and a contract, they will most likely produce this road for the budget that they set inside the time frame that they say they will produce it. Only problem is, some people here are not so happy about the road. The second thing that you can see, if you look at these two quotes from the East-West Needs study, so one from page 134. Any expansion of the road network should instead be focused on improving road network connectivity for freight and business travel. That is not peak travel. So, back in 2008, when this report was delivered, what they were saying was improvements to roads are not about peak travel. If you want to do something about peak low travel, you should build public transport, because that will and fix up issues of public transport relating to, particularly in that study, the way that the lines going west and north interfere with each other. And the reason for that is because, as Alana said, if you want to remove lots of cars off the road, you need to put the people in them into a train. I had the most beautiful conversation with one of the transport engineers, the road transport engineers in Perth, about the Mandurah Railway. He said to me, "We love the Mandurah Railway. It's 6 lanes of freeway each way." And I thought, why can't our road engineers think like that? The Eastern Freeway, the other quote, the Eastern Freeway is another key route. However, it's not utilised by truck freight due to a lack of connection with other freeways and major industrial areas. Now, if you look at this road, the one thing it does do is connect the freeway, make it go somewhere, and it connects it to somewhere very important that trucks want to go to, and that's the port. So as far as I can see from these sorts of statements, and there are more of them throughout all of the literature, including the most recent public newsletter that was sent to you, this route is primarily about facilitating truck travel and facilitating business travel in the form of small white vans moving things around. The eastern suburbs currently doesn't have a lot of B-doubles screaming up and down the freeway, but they're coming. To build this road, they will have a reason to come. The other thing I think that's in play is you don't say no to $1 billion from the federal government. Right? Even though it's a bit like me borrowing $100,000 from my parents, taking $100,000 from my parents and taking out a $500,000 loan when my income is unstable and $70,000 a year, and I'm going to be in debt for 35 years, but the money's there, you take it and use it. This is a big problem we need to do something about. Do I want to say anything else? Oh yeah, just to add to the last thing that Ilana said. She was talking about agglomeration economies. I've been doing a bit of work on developing a computer program that will enable us to look at where agglomerations are in Melbourne. If you look at recent literature by Kevin O'Connor, who's been studying agglomerations in Melbourne for many, many years, he will tell you that Melbourne is made up of 5 areas, 5 kind of lobes that stick out from the centre of the city. And people actually work and live in those areas. And they're quite happily doing that. That was backed up by the data in the East-West Tunnel study. It said, as most of you would probably feel fairly comfortable with, about 12% of people are trying to cross, going up, people ending at the freeway and going up Allen Road. About 12% of those coming down the Eastern Freeway are trying to go west of Racecourse Road. Right? That was the East-West study. As I understand it from the newsletter that you were all sent by the Linking Melbourne Authority, apparently that's not true. New studies have been done, which we don't have access to, but apparently the figure is actually that 12% of cars going down the Eastern Freeway are trying to go into the city, and everyone else is trying to go west. I'm not quite sure whether, as I said, I've not seen the data on that. Apparently that is what the latest It's a little bit interesting that one can completely reverse the numbers, but maybe it could be true. Traffic modelling is not an exact science, as a lot of data show. Okay. So, on to this question of sovereignty and democracy. So when you question a sovereign decision, you question the right of the sovereign to make decisions. And that is no non-weighty thing. Right? It matters that the government is able to make decisions matters. Sometimes they need to make decisions. Right? So if you're going to set yourself up to say that sovereign decision is wrong, you want to be aware that you're questioning the right of the government to make sovereign decisions at all. And it's not a non-weighty thing to take on. Right? One of the reasons why sovereign decisions get taken by governments, or are allowed to get taken, is because we don't take responsibility. We like it when someone else takes responsibility. So if you're going to set up an interruption to the government's ability to decide for us, then we need to make sure that we're willing to make clear what it is that we want to be decided on. Does that make sense? That was a bit of a garbled sentence. Okay. The other thing about sovereign decisions, they're not about rational debate. They're not made, the attachment to we've made this decision, so we're going to go ahead. It's not subject to the traffic numbers, the size of the tunnel, the amount of money, or any of that. Right? It's about, but we're the government, we get to say. So the sovereign is only going to change their decision if it's established by a higher power that is the right thing to do. And that's by voters making it clear that you're going to say on this issue. And you're not just going to retreat into the dark after the next election or after the next poll. It's going to take really challenging that, establishing that the voters will not put up with this. So I have one last slide. A word of warning from one of the protesters about CityLink. Someone who definitely got drawn into arguing about the kind of road rather than should we have the road. They did, after a while, give up and then got into smokestacks, size of bike length, etc. She says this: I think if you're objective the whole time you're saying what you're saying in terms of making the world a better place, and maybe not in a single reference, they furiously possibly believe that they are making the world a better place in making it easier for trucks to go from one end of the city to the other. So you've got to remember here, their rationality isn't yours. It's not going to be. They believe as passionately in what they believe in as you do. So in the end, it's going to come down to numbers.